today we are going to talk about traveling. We're going to touch a little bit on traveling with babies because we've done that before. That was earlier in our family life. But now we're traveling with preteens and teens. So talk a little bit about what the experience was like, maybe some highs and lows, and maybe some takeaways and any tips and tricks on. I know you've got a bunch of experience traveling with babies, so maybe you got some takeaways.
Lots of tricks and tips up my sleeve. But we're going to talk a lot about our big trip this summer. Mm-hmm. We went on a huge adventure travel trip backpacking through Peru this summer. And so we're going to talk about a lot of stuff that happened on that special trip.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Mm-hmm. And maybe even pooping in public.
So let's talk about travel.
All right.
I love
your
traveling
least
just
favorite
the two
subject.
of us. Yeah. I love traveling just the two of us. That's the episode, right?
No.
Oh, what's the episode?
We're going to talk about traveling with our kids.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like a nightmare.
So just to create some context, you and I have traveled a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we've traveled to how many countries combined, you think?
Many. Well, our honeymoon, we covered a lot of countries.
Yeah, we did.
Our honeymoon, I told Amanda, I was like, I need you to fill a backpack with one of everything. And that was basically it. Mm-hmm. You're like, well, what are we doing? What are the events? I'm like, one of everything. One nice dress, one sundress, one bathing suit, one pair of flip-flops, one pair of heels, one pair of runners. Like, it was one of everything.
You didn't tell me to pack a parka, but I did buy one on our trip. Do you remember?
That brown one.
Yeah. Was it brown?
Brown with like little fluff around it.
Okay.
Like
this was 20 years ago.
Yeah,
I don't remember. You have a better memory
I also
than
had a jacket.
That got ruined by red wine.
Yeah.
Okay. This is a whole other thing that we're going down a rabbit trail because this is all about our honeymoon. We backpacked through Europe on our honeymoon. It was an incredible adventure.
Yeah.
And that could be a whole podcast.
We got married so fast that we got to know each other after the wedding. Yeah. Basically.
Yeah. And that backpacking trip was like really good. Really good get to know you.
We did like
adventure.
2.5 months traveling through Europe, all through Europe, just backpacking. And then we went back to Canada because I had to MC, or I had committed to emceeing a wedding. So we did that.
And you broke your leg.
Then I broke my leg. So then we had to recover from that. And then we went to Costa Rica and rented a place on a beach. So 8 months of just getting to know each other. So we've done some traveling together.
So we've traveled extensively through Europe, through Central South America, we haven't really hit a lot of Asian countries yet. That's
not
next,
yet.
Like on our bucket list.
Does being a really good traveler as a couple or an individual necessarily mean that you're going to be a great traveler with kids?
No.
Or is it a different skill set?
That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah.
So we're going to get
way
into
more
it.
preparation to travel with kids. Yeah.
So for people who are listening who don't know, we have 5 children. They range in age from 10 to 17. So they're not babies anymore. Mm-hmm. We have been traveling with them since they were babies. They have visited many of the states in America. We've traveled internationally with them to Canada, to Colombia, to Peru, which we're going to talk about in just a minute. But we've learned a lot of lessons along the way.
Yeah.
And
I was going to say, before we get into the specifics of this trip, because I think there's a lot we can pull from it and share about traveling with kids from 10 to 17. Give me a little quick rundown on some of the most important things, maybe a couple of tricks that you used when traveling with infants and toddlers and how you made it work. And then maybe a horror story.
So I had 4 kids in 5 years. So I have traveled alone with 4 kids under the age of 5. I've been on planes, trains, and automobiles with them. And there's definitely strategies that when you're a young mom of young kids, you use those things to help cope, for lack of a better word, to help you get through it. Traveling with kids, like when they're really little, it's difficult and you have to be really smart about it. So
you dislike a screaming child as much as the other person dislikes the screaming child.
My own screaming child.
You're not. It's actually worse because you're like, I'm so sorry, and no, I cannot get this kid to be quiet.
It's brutal.
It's brutal.
But there are some ways to make it more tolerable and enjoyable and even fun. So, something that I did when they were really little, I would go to the dollar store and I'd buy a bunch of junk. I'd buy a bunch of things that I knew that they liked, and then I would wrap them up. And if we had like a 5 hour plane ride across the country, I would have a bunch of little gifts, and I'd every 20 minutes or 30 minutes, sometimes even 10 minutes, just depends like what the situation was. I'd give them a little gift and they would open it up, and that would give them something to do, and then they'd play with their little dollar store thing, and then it would just keep them busy for a
Yeah.
little while. Another fun
A packet of Matchbox cars is great. Like things
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Other fun things are like
Sorry, a packet of Matchbox cars, but giving them one at a time wrapped individually.
Yeah.
That's the trick.
yeah, really drawing it out.
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
the
yeah.
trick. Another thing is like those like peel and stick decals that you can like those little film ones, right? Like that you put on your sliding door so you don't run into it or whatever. Getting a pack of those, they can peel them and put them on and off of the like flip down tray or the window or
Yeah.
whatever. Like little things like that that just are tactile and keep them busy. Little things of Play-Doh and things like that. So we always were very prepared with the toys, with the snacks, with the
Lots of
activities.
snacks.
Yeah. Thinking ahead and staying prepared. I think that was key when they were little.
And for snacks, like trying to avoid messy snacks, like a Skittle, one Skittle at a time is not super messy,
Mhm.
right? But some things that crumble, crackers can be pretty messy.
Yeah,
like
we were always pretty
yeah.
careful not to leave a mess for like the flight attendants or the people, right? Like that were cleaning up after our family.
Part of it also is the time you fly. It's thinking about nap times. It's like how can I prepare the days leading up to the trip? Maybe by adjusting nap times a little bit,
Adjusting
to fit
their
the
sleep
flying.
schedules, yeah. And I think just being really flexible and understanding like, look, this is like, a special circumstance. So
Yeah.
maybe they get extra iPad time.
I was gonna say
or-
extra sugar.
Yeah.
Like when they're crashing, just re-hit the sugar.
Let them.
Yeah.
Give them, like, I know as our kids have gotten older and now they drink soda, and like I cringe when they're, like pounding the sodas on the flight, but I'm like, it's not every day. It's a one-time
Yeah.
thing. Like if this gets us through it, let them have all the sodas.
Also, we've created this experience for them where they know that when they get on the plane, they can get anything they want, like the things that are free.
Mhm.
So they don't have to. They still ask us sometimes because they're in that habit, but they don't have to ask for like a can of Coke. We're like,
Right.
no, we're traveling,
Right.
and so it's this thing where when you're traveling, when you're moving from one place to another, like you're on the flight, you're on
Right.
the train, they can break all the rules. They can have 3 Coca-Colas.
Not all the rules.
Not all the rules, but they
But-
can have like 3 Cokes. They can do stuff they wouldn't
Yeah,
normally
yeah,
do.
yeah.
So it's made it into this thing that we're, on some of our flights, we're up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning to drive up to LAX to catch a flight. They're not stressed out, freaking out, dragging their feet. They know this is going to be a fun day where they
Right.
get to break all the rules.
And then when they're drinking a soda at 8 a.m., we're not stressing out and freaking out because we know like it's a special circumstance, right?
we kind of do this thing too where we're like, we try to go early enough where we can hit Starbucks. They have their little breakfast meal that they want, and we don't take them to Starbucks. We don't go to Starbucks with our kids. It's not a thing that we do
On the regular.
Mm-hmm. But in an airport, this is like an experience for them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's trying to position the actual travel from here to there, like that experience, as a highlight.
Rather than being a chore, like it's like, oh, we just got to get through this. It's like, how can we make this something fun and
we
special?
get unlimited movies, unlimited iPad time, unlimited caffeine. Like it's this once in a while thing they get to do. And so they actually wake up like what I've experienced with them is that they're always excited in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
They're ready. They were packed the night before. We roll the bags out. They're excited to get to the airport because they know they're going to get whatever drink they want and whatever snack they want, whatever breakfast they want. And then they're going to have 5 or 6 hours on the flight of just like free for all.
Yeah.
So
I think the key for traveling with kids, whether they're little or big, is preparedness.
Yeah.
And luckily you're married to somebody who is really good
who
at
prepares?
that.
Yeah.
I have had some pretty horrible experiences, but one that comes to mind is when I had 3 little ones. We hadn't had our 4th child yet, but the 3 were babies. They were all under the age of 3. And I was traveling from LA across the country to North Carolina. And I had a layover. I think it was in like Dallas. And the flight got canceled. Things got moved around. They moved gates. Their nap times were all messed up. They were all just melting down, and I was just outnumbered.
And they become like a limp noodle
Yeah,
when they're
absolutely.
melting down. So like,
Yeah.
laying over your
Yeah.
arm. And yeah.
And so I think that you told me actually before my first flight took off that the second flight was going to be delayed. And so I'm already in like, dread and stress mode. And then our daughter was an infant. And so, they tell you to give them a bottle or a pacifier or something to suck on, like when you're descending. Is that the word?
Yep.
Yeah. And
Landing.
yeah, so when you're landing, like because their ears pop, just like how we would chew gum or whatever, if they're sucking on something, then it helps them. And so I thought, okay, I'm gonna, handle this. I'm gonna give her a bottle. I had it all prepped, and she's gonna have it like just the right moment, and she's not gonna cry. It's gonna be perfect. So I'm feeding her this bottle. She just chugged that bottle down, and then I like literally as we were touching down, I lifted her up to burp her, and I didn't even need to like pat her on the back. She just, as soon as she was upright, she spewed the whole bottle out right into the aisle. I was in an aisle seat, and it was just like all over in the aisle.
Which all the people sitting around you love.
We were sitting close to the front. And so like, I remember looking at, the flight attendants are sitting facing you in their like jump seats or whatever. And I'm looking at her like, I'm sorry. Like I was so horrified. And she's like, and she's just throwing up, like it's just like projectile. Yeah. And the flight attendant's like, hold her close to you. And I was like, that's the last thing I want to do. Yeah, it was just like, it was awful. And obviously Asher and Judah were like, I don't know, 2 and 3. They were no help. Yeah. So I have this baby who's just like projectile vomited all over the place, all over her, all over me, all over the aisle. These 2 boys who are just like restless and like wild. And it was just, I was totally outnumbered, and it was just a really wild, chaotic moment.
So your point is,
I got through it.
Yeah. Your point is that even don't be too hard on yourself.
Right.
Even with the best preparation and lots of experience
right.
as a traveler without kids and then with kids, lots of experience. It still all went wrong and wasn't your fault.
Right.
You just have to manage it. Here, let's move that a little closer to you because
thank you.
It's picking me up.
Yeah, and so I think back on that circumstance, and just the other day I was traveling for work, and there was a couple, and they had 2 little ones, and they had all the stuff, the bags and the car seats and the stuff, and they're struggling, and the babies were crying, and they let me go ahead of them at TSA, and I was able to just be like, hey, it's okay. It's going to be okay. It gets better, and this is fine. Like, don't worry about me. Don't worry about anybody around you. Just get through this, and, give your kid a bag of Skittles. Like, it'll be okay.
I think that's one thing we try to do is that we both, when we see someone that's like struggling with a kid that's just melting down, it's like, it's okay, Mama Bear, you got this.
Yeah.
Like,
it's definitely made me more empathetic towards those like parents who are traveling with young children and struggling.
But when we see something, we say something. When we see it, we try to encourage
them. I
them.
don't just give a knowing look or anything. I'm verbally, I'm like,
you can do this.
Yeah.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah. It's going to be okay. So it definitely made me more
Don't
empathetic.
be hard on yourself. Most of us have at one point in our life been in the same situation. You got this.
Yeah.
Do you need any help? Right?
Yep.
Because you experienced that. Like people would grab a car seat and carry it for you. People would do stuff.
Yeah, countless times.
Yeah, don't be afraid to ask for help. Some people might look at you and be turds because they're having a bad day.
Right.
But all it takes is one willing to help.
Right.
And your whole day gets better. So
absolutely.
So that's traveling with babies.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pivot and talk about our current experience, which is traveling with like preteens and teens.
Right. So this summer, we went on a big adventure.
Hold on a second.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting a lot further away from your mic when you talk.
Okay.
And then it doesn't pick you up very well.
Okay.
So we gotta either. Is that good? Perfect. Okay.
So this summer we went on a big adventure. We decided to take our 5 children backpacking for 3 weeks through Peru.
Why?
And well, so the main purpose of it was to go see where you grew up.
Right.
You grew up in the Amazon rainforest. I had seen where you grew up. I'd visited that area about a decade ago. Our kids had never. And they've heard all these stories about dad growing up.
Michaela, actually. So Michaela,
Right.
Amanda was pregnant with Michaela the last time we had been there. And so she's funny and she has lots of little comments. And so when we landed, her response was, it's good to be back, boys. Because she's the only one
She
that
was just trying to
technically
troll her
been in
brothers.
Peru.
Yeah.
She was trolling them because she had been.
I think I was like 10 weeks pregnant.
Yeah, barely. But
with
she was
her.
like, this brings back all the memories. Like, looking around. She's funny.
She's
So,
like, smells the same.
yep, smells the same, looks the same, sounds the same, very familiar.
Yeah. Just to one up them. No, but none of them had visited Peru, and we wanted to show them where dad grew up.
Yeah.
And also go on an epic adventure with them. And so we decided to spend some time in the mountains and hike Machu Picchu as a family, go see Machu Picchu. And then we also spent a portion of our time in the city in Lima and a lot of our time in the jungle, seeing where you grew up and experiencing jungle life. So,
Why backpacking though?
well, okay, so you and I have backpacked
Yeah.
together, and you backpacked. You know, you've been traveling since you were a teenager
14.
on your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, like on across to the other side of the world, and you've
14 was my first trip without my parents, like flying around Peru to go visit friends. 16 was my first international trip where I went to Europe from the Amazon.
right. And you've volunteered in an orphanage in Nepal, and
Yeah.
you've gone on these like big epic adventures, and most of the time you were backpacking. And so you're a pro. You introduced me to backpacking. We've done it together, and we thought, wouldn't that be fun to take these little sheltered Orange County kids out of their orange bubble and go stay in uncomfortable places and travel, and hit the road and have some like real life experiences.
I also think it's important for kids to see and understand that the world is within reach.
Yeah.
You don't have to have your career, have your bank account, have all your stuff set up, and
Right.
then you travel.
Right.
Because I traveled for sure, and then we both traveled together without a lot of money.
Right.
We were willing to stay wherever.
But even if you have the means to do so, it's valuable to do it in another way so that you can gain those experiences.
Well, you definitely get more of an experience of what the country's actually like when you're traveling on a budget.
Absolutely.
But I think the big win for me and my reason for doing it was like I wanted the kids to all experience that they could travel when they're 20. They can travel when they're 22, 26. They don't have to have everything set up and then go to the all-inclusive.
Yeah.
They don't have to fly on the best airline that's hopefully they fly on the safest airline, but they don't have to fly on the one with all the little like bells and whistles and perks. There are ways to experience these huge experiences on a budget. And with 7 of us, it made sense to do it on a budget because we want to do more than just one trip every 5-6 years. And so we have to figure out a way to make them affordable. But I wanted the kids to see that if they ever wanted to go on a trip like to Peru, they can do it for a lot less than what a lot of people think that it takes to actually be able to go and have some of these adventures.
Right.
So where I'm looking at my show notes over there.
Well, I already told you where.
Where do we go? What were the 3 main spots? So Peru's divided into 3 distinct regions. There's the coastal desert, and then there's the Andes Mountain, and there's the Amazon rainforest.
Right.
And so you fly into the coastal desert. That's where Lima is. And then we went right to Cusco, which you said was the highlight of the trip.
Oh
for
my
you.
gosh, yeah. I would go to Cusco tomorrow. If you were like, let's go to Cusco for the weekend, I'd be like, let's
narrow
go.
cobblestone streets, great coffee shops, great restaurants. Like
The food was out of this world. It was really beautiful and different and something. It was unexpected. I think it really blew me away just because I wasn't expecting to enjoy it as much as I did.
I hope we can insert some pictures of the trip.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Like a little visual so they can see what we're talking about.
Yeah. And I think the weather was so different. Like it was cold and it was in the middle of the summer. And so that was just something.
Our summer, not their summer.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Middle of our summer. And so we're going there in July from Southern California where it's just like blazing hot. Yeah. And then we go up into the mountains. It was just something so out of the ordinary and different and unexpected. And so.
How was the altitude?
Fine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
I
gotta
was
take it a little slower. You have to be aware.
absolutely, yeah. Climbing stairs, I mean, there were a lot of stairs to climb. That wasn't,
Coming back from the
enjoyable.
main plaza, we had to take our time because you went
Yeah.
up that hill and you're
Especially
like,
you're
oh
carrying
my
like loads
gosh.
of groceries up
Yeah.
cobblestone stairs. But I think I was warned that the altitude sickness would just take me out, and I wasn't really affected by it at all. It was fine.
Yeah. I think you just have to give yourself a little grace and give yourself enough days, right? So
Yeah.
if we had 4 days in Cusco, we would have been like, we can't waste a day sitting
Yeah.
around. But remember, we just like walked down the street. We got like food from a restaurant really close to where the Airbnb we were staying at. Coffee shops right around there.
Yeah,
Slow
so I would
walk
say that's
down.
one thing that we do when we're traveling with our kids, and we've always done this, whether they're big or small. We don't overplan, right?
Mhm.
Like we're
Yep.
not like, okay, we're gonna get there at 6 o'clock, and then at 6:01 we're gonna get a taxi, and at 6:15 we're gonna be at this place, and then we have to wrap up. We don't have these tours and these plans, and it's all like stacked. Like we're like, okay, on this day we're gonna get here, and we're gonna do this one thing. Right? Like it's
Also, says the person who doesn't do any of the planning for any of the trips.
well, no, listen.
And I do all the planning.
I
So
can
I'm just saying
plan
there's
a trip.
I'm saying there's some things like hiking Machu Picchu, you have to like book that way in advance.
Yes, so I can
There's some things, yeah.
may I can
Yes.
plan a trip, and I will plan a trip. And
I
I'm
cannot
perfectly
wait.
capable to do that. But
You're-
between
you're-
no, wait. Between the two of us who lived in Peru.
Yeah, I was
who's
going to say
traveled
your
all around
planning,
Peru.
your planning would
Like-
actually be better and more organized, but I knew the area and I
Right.
knew the things to hit, so it made sense for me to do it. And I also knew the foods, and so I knew kind of what to look for to give us variety in foods. Um,
I'm
even as far
happy
as
to
restaurants.
relinquish that to you.
Yeah.
Like, and
But
you
what-
did a phenomenal job. So you are really good at building spreadsheets and keeping things organized that way.
Mhm.
I don't think in spreadsheets the way that you do, and so that was really beneficial to have a spreadsheet. We started that spreadsheet, I think, like 6 months before
Yeah.
our trip.
Basic things we wanted to do, and then we
Yeah.
filled in the dates, and we had and on that spreadsheet we have all the links to all the tickets we
Right.
purchased and all that stuff. Yeah.
So you and I, it was very collaborative, right? Like
Yeah.
we moved dates around, and we were like looking at what we wanted to do when and where we wanted to go. And so it was a collaborative input, but you definitely have more experience in that region of the world. And so it only made sense for you to really like plan out the trip based on your knowledge.
Some people go and they're just like willy-nilly, like they land and what are we going to do, right? So I did trips like that. I did a trip where we landed in Quito, Ecuador, and we had flights out of Rio de Janeiro like a half a year later. So we just had to get from Ecuador to Brazil, and we had 5-6 months, something like that, to get to the airport in Brazil for our flight, right?
Yeah.
Nothing in between that was planned. Not a single bus or plane ticket or anything was planned. No hotels, nothing. It was just like, what do we want to do?
Yeah.
That's a different type of unplanned. We planned the travel parts of it. We planned the hotel room where we'd stay. We planned some of that because of the kids, right? When you're traveling with a really small group, it's easy to slot yourself into any hotel. When you're looking for room for 7 people, that's a little tougher last minute. So some of that stuff.
But we did make some last minute changes, and that's something too that I want to touch on, and maybe we'll touch on it a little bit later, but being flexible and being able to make those last minute changes, even with a big family and with traveling with kids, it's really important to have that mindset where you're like, okay, we'll figure it out. Because everything, especially in this day and age, I mean, the trip that you're talking about that you went on with your friends is like over 20 years ago, right?
No internet, like
Yeah.
no
Now
phones.
with like
It was great.
our phones and Airbnb
Yeah.
and ride sharing and all that kind of stuff, like you can pivot and you can like figure things out pretty quickly.
I was gonna say we knew what city we'd be in on any given day of the trip, and we knew what time we had flights and stuff like that. But within the day, we didn't pick any restaurants. We didn't pick any activities other than the one that had to be booked way in advance, the Machu Picchu hike or tour of the ruins. But we try to like kind of go with how we're feeling, and if we're on a trip and we're super tired, we don't pressure ourselves to go see that one more museum or to go to see that one more thing that somebody else posted about, right?
Right.
It's really awesome. Like we have access to Instagram and Pinterest and like all kinds of stuff. So you ahead of time we can kind of see like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to take their kids to this? Let's prioritize these 3 things when we're in that city.
Yeah.
But we don't even pick the day we're going to do it unless we had to purchase a ticket. So
Right.
that's one thing is traveling with a bit older kids. You don't have to do as much of the meticulous planning. When you have babies, you don't want to be switching hotels because it didn't work out and there's no hot
Well,
water.
and you have
you
to
don't
plan
want
things
to.
around nap times and
Yeah.
this and that. And so, yeah, you're able to be a little bit more like flexible with the big kids.
Okay.
So that's nice.
What were highlights for you of the trip?
So definite highlight was the train ride to Aguas Calientes
Yeah.
when we were heading
the base
towards
of Machu Picchu Mountain.
Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
That was so cool.
Yeah.
They made it really special, and that train ride was definitely something I'll never forget. Machu Picchu itself was just incredible,
Yeah,
like
it's mind-blowing.
mind-blowing. Yeah. So being there, like one of the wonders of the world, it's just like you can't quite even believe that you're there. It feels very surreal. So that was really cool.
It's a place in the world that you've heard about for a long time and that most people have heard about and that many travelers have actually gone to. So
Yeah.
it's a connection point with other travelers. We're like, oh, have you ever gone to Machu Picchu?
Right.
Oh, did you do the hike? Did you? And so it's definitely a bucket list type
and
of
to be able to
experience.
give that to our kids, like I'm
Mhm.
in my 40s and I'm seeing it for the first time, and I'm with my 10-year-old who's seeing it for the first time, and
He's
I'm
"Whoa."
like,
He's
yeah,
like freaking out. He's like, this is incredible. Like,
that
yeah.
shapes you, right? And so that was a really special moment for me. I think like there were little kind of like micro moments, like you taught the kids like a traveling card game,
Mhm.
and so just seeing them like bonding together and playing these card games together and really like
Card games that we used to play with
Yeah.
travel when we were young.
like
Yeah,
so
so
sitting
fun.
in like a random like pizza place in the middle of Cusco waiting for our food, and the kids are playing card games and just like
Yeah.
howling with laughter, like those little moments.
Asher was doing that laugh that he can barely breathe.
Right.
I
Like
love it
that
when he
wouldn't
does that,
happen
yeah.
if we went to the local pizza joint in our town that we live
No,
in,
yeah.
right? Like it's a different feeling. You can't really like even like reproduce that. So those were just
You like detach from all the things that are heavy
Yeah.
back home, and you get this like, let's live in the now. Let's not worry about tomorrow. Let's not worry about
Mhm.
yesterday. Let's live in the now, fully enjoy this experience, and then take this experience back with us to our life and see
Yeah.
and learn from it, right?
Yeah.
But really fully immerse ourselves in today when we're on
Absolutely.
the trip. And I think that's something that is really hard to get 7 people all on board with until you disconnect physically from everything.
Yeah.
And
And it was hard. It's hard to disconnect physically. I mean, like physically, mentally, emotionally. Like, so we're entrepreneurs. We own 3 businesses, and we run a nonprofit. We have 5 kids. They all have their own things going on. And so, like, detaching for 3 weeks, that's hard to do, right?
yeah.
And for some of us in our family, we thrive on schedule and routine and familiarity. And so that made things tough, being out of the rhythm of things and so disconnected for some of us.
Yeah.
But I think that the overall like consensus is that it was just a really special time for all of us, even though it felt challenging at times. It was worth it.
Yeah.
What were some highlights for you?
One was when my friend Christina and I were looking out, and one of her kids and 2 of our kids were on a paddleboard playing in the river, right where in the same exact spot that she and I had played as kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing our kids in the Amazon jungle playing together. It was just like,
Surreal.
whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was really cool. Seeing the soccer field that we donated for the first time was amazing. I'd love it if we had a picture of that to show. Let's do that. Going there, we had donated during COVID. It was the right time.
What does that mean? We donated a soccer field.
So we'd been helping an academy run by my friend since 2012. Had made trips down, brought equipment, taught them the business side of how to run an academy so it can be sustainable. And he had a little piece of land. He had asked me in 2012 if I thought that he should move his academy there. And I said, no, man, it's all about location. because where he was renting was right in the middle of town. But then everything changed. A huge mall was built about 3 blocks away from this property, his house now. And so the city had grown and grown past where this was. So now he's in the center of a major hub of the city. And so we were like, okay, let's do it. There's an opportunity to build a field. Super cool to be down there and hear their side of the story of how they experienced us coming in and saying like, hey, let's do it now. Let's build the field. Let's build an artificial turf field with proper lighting, with a proper drainage system in place. That was the most important part. The field that they had started using, it was dirt and it flooded for about 3 months of the year during the rainy season. So we lifted the level of the playing area, flattened it, put in a really good irrigation system, put in lights, netting so we wouldn't lose balls, gated it off for safety for the kids so that people couldn't just come and go. They had to get through the gate. Built a kitchen so they could feed the kids and so they could have an additional revenue stream of a snack bar and hot food. And so we built all that like 4 years ago, and we'd never seen it. And so we saw pictures of it, some videos, but it's not the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so to go down there and I'd been there in 2018 with 2 of my best friends, and we had played on the dirt version of it, right? So to go back down there and be able to see training sessions happen, see little scrimmages with kids going on happen, it was just like, it was so cool. And to hear them tell their version of the story and how it was just like, for them in their life, it was an absolute miracle.
Yeah.
It was something that they had hoped for and prayed for specifically for 10, 12 years. And to the point where they were saying like, if this is not supposed to happen, God, please take this from me. Like, I can't keep getting my hopes up about this. Right. And then right after that had happened, that conversation between the two of them is when I texted and said, hey, what's going on with the field? Because I had a chunk of money, and I knew, I felt like, I think we could build the whole thing for this amount. And we had the plans in place. I sketched out a little sketch and sent it to him, and he laughed and sent me back actual plans that looked just like the sketch I'd drawn. So that was really cool to go down there and actually see it, to hear their version of the story, to tear up and listen to how our organization played such a big role in who they're able to impact and what their life looks like today. And to just get hugs from people that are like so grateful. A lot of the work that we do with our nonprofit, we don't actually get to meet the people that we're helping. And we don't get to experience that like moment of seeing the dream and the plan come to fruition and then a family blessed by it. We just hear about it. We get a picture about it, which is awesome. But this was a new experience of getting to go there and actually see it. So that was amazing. I really had a good time in Cusco as well. Aguascalientes had a good time there. Machu Picchu. It was my 4th or 5th time going, and so it was super fun. It was fun to see my kids there and to drag them up the hike
to the sun gate.
Not all of them were down for a long hike at altitude, but we made them do it. And
we had a really great guide.
We had a great
Shout
guide.
out
Yep,
Jardy. And
then just Machu Picchu, and then all the travel was just fun. It was just fun to be with the kids and the card games and all that fun stuff. So those are the highlights for me. We already talked a little bit about how we prepared for traveling with little kids and traveling with older kids. I'll just add in that because we did want to talk about how we prepped for it. So we did tell them our itinerary.
Yeah.
Kids like schedules and they like structure, and this is going to be 19 to 21 days of just chaos and madness, right? But they knew where we were going to be every day. We talked about it. We told them what days we were flying. We told them when the flights were. We told them where we were sitting on the plane. So they had these little anchor points of like, I know what's going on this day and this time. And so for some of our kids who need and thrive and enjoy and experience structure as a really positive thing, that was a gift for them to have that, right? Which is good. And it provided opportunity for them to give feedback. And so we kind of knew the ones that didn't want to do certain things ahead of time, like, and so we could prepare the conversations of like, remember, we're just trying new things. We don't have to love it, but we can't say we don't like something. We don't try it, right? And to all of their credit, they were all like all in. They were all in, wanted to have a great experience. Really fun part was going to the camping store and all picking out our backpacks and having the guys fit everybody to make sure it fit them. It's important. If you're going to backpack a lot and you're going to require them to carry some weight, like some of their gear, then you need to make sure that it sits right on the hips, that the shoulders are carrying the right amount of the load. And so getting fitted and stuff, they were loving it.
And this was kind of like our kids' inaugural backpacking trip.
Yeah.
And so they all got
They were
their
telling all their
own-
friends at school. Like
yeah. They got their own backpacks and then their own like little personal size
day
carry,
bag.
day bag. And we're hoping that those serve them on many trips for many years to come. So that was kind of like a special moment for you as a dad who loves backpacking and traveling to be able to equip your kids with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That was even before the trip started.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of like the fun in it was like the prep and the getting ready for it and all that kind of stuff. And like you said, like, and the
anticipation.
actual travel, like being on the buses and the trains and
Yeah.
the vans and like just seeing things like that we had never seen before on all
Riding
those
in the train and having the
excursions.
kids pull out the cards and start playing cards, with the little tables on the train and stuff. And then having them like eyes wide looking at the mountains and looking at, at all the sights to see out the train window while they're playing travel card games that I used to play in my early 20s. So those were fun moments for me. Those were
for sure.
highlights.
For
So,
sure.
Challenges and lessons learned. Let's see.
Well, okay, we're going to talk about how we all got sick.
Yeah, we did. I mean, we all got sick.
So at
that
the
sucked.
very end of our trip, so how our trip was structured was we we flew into Lima, obviously, but then we literally we slept at the airport hotel and then we took off to Cusco right away, first thing in the morning. So we spent the first third of our trip in the mountains in Cusco and Machu Picchu. Then we spent the middle third of our trip in the jungle.
Yep.
And then we spent the last third of our trip in the city, in Lima.
In Lima, the desert.
There were some little things that happened in the jungle. Actually, there were some things that happened in Cusco too. We had a sick kid in Cusco. And so throwing up all night.
That could have been altitude.
Sure, could have been, but that happened.
Yeah.
And then in the jungle, I actually got a really crazy heat rash up and down the backs of my legs. So that was not enjoyable. And I can't recall if anybody else got sick in the jungle. I don't think so. But then once we got to Lima, then it was like, you name the symptom, one member in our family had it.
Yeah.
Like we all had.
Same basic illness, different versions of the illness.
I still, who knows what that was? That was a super bug and it traveled through our whole family and we
tested for COVID a bunch, didn't have COVID.
Yeah, no, but we had every symptom you can think of
Yeah.
and it was brutal. And when you're traveling, when you're sick, all you want is your bed. And that was a pretty miserable portion of our trip. And it was pretty difficult to navigate because when you're in another country, even though you speak the language, you speak Spanish fluently, but trying to find a pharmacy with the things that you think that you need and you're not.
I don't know what's available
Right.
medicine wise, and I don't know what they're called.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's
it
just
was
trying to
tough.
explain, and then you end up with a tube of icy hot, and you're like, Vicks Vapor Rub. Like, what?
You're rubbing it on your tongue.
Yeah, you're like-
and you're sick and you're trying to take care of sick people.
Yeah.
And it's just, it was pretty
And
gnarly.
I would say the biggest thing is that when you're sick, you have to mentally remind yourself that your patience is low.
Yeah.
And so don't get frustrated. You're going to get frustrated. Don't act out on that frustration. Don't react. Try to remember that it's just kids being kids. No one's trying to make your day worse. You're the one that feels sick.
Yeah.
And so advocate for yourself. One thing that I am proud about that trip and about getting sick is Judah got pretty sick. And I said to him, Judah, this is a once in a lifetime experience. You just got to take some Advil and push through. And he did, right? And he got sick first. So we all got it, but he was sick first. Remember I think he kind of had it off and on the whole trip. He was sick in Cusco and then he got sick again at the end with kind of this, I think he caught it again, whatever we shared around. But he went on a walk around the city when he was feeling terrible. He took a Dayquil and some Tylenol and he was like, all right, let's go. And so that I think is something that you have to be prepared for when you're traveling. Is hey, you might get sick, but you're not going to remember the being sick part other than it just being a bad memory.
Right.
You're not going to remember those moments. What
Right.
you'll remember is seeing the museum, seeing
Yeah.
the cool thing that you went and saw. Walking by the baby llama and petting it, and like those are the things
Did
that he
you
got
just
to
say Yama?
because that's what it's called in Peru. And we're
There's
talking
two
about being in Peru.
there's
Llama.
two things that I'm really proud of during that time. And one is that we were very prepared. And so even though we were scrambling and trying to find pharmacies and like, that was really difficult, like we had our basic necessities.
Yeah.
Before we went on our trip, we bought really like anything you can think of. We bought like anti-nausea, anti-gas, Advil, Tylenol, Imodium, like all these different things, and took them out of the packages and put them in like some big Ziploc bags. And we carried those things around, even though we were like, may or may not use these. Maybe it's just extra weight, but like those Ziploc bags full of medicine sure came in handy.
Yeah.
And so I was really glad that we had that stuff, even though we needed more stuff and didn't.
But you can get
it
it's
got
just to
us
like
through.
cover you when you wake up in the middle of the night and
Right.
you're like cold sweats.
Yeah.
Right? I think the thing you don't need to pack that people pack is like, don't take shampoo. Everyone in the world sells shampoo.
Right.
Like, but people still take their shampoo.
Yeah. And that was something in Peru. You can actually take more than 4 milliliters on flights if it's within the country.
Oh yeah.
And so like you can take like water bottles, you can take bottles of shampoo, all that kind of stuff. And so like, yeah, we just bought like a bottle of shampoo and conditioner, and it lasted our whole family through the whole trip. Right. So instead of bringing all those travel size ones, we just kind of like, there's some things you can just get what you need when you get there. Right. The other thing that we did that I was proud of was we majorly pivoted in regards to our accommodations. So when we got to Lima, we thought it would be fun to stay in a hostel. We were like,
same one I stayed in. And I was like,
nostalgic vibes. And we actually stayed there too. We stayed there when we were there on our trip years ago. And so we were like, wouldn't that be fun? Like, so that our kids can say they stayed in a hostel and stayed in the same one we did.
It
was. It's just not fun when you're sick.
Had a nighttime problem.
Yeah. So it was in a
drums.
very lively area of Lima, and
Literally like right outside the window, probably 50 feet away from the window. There are people playing drums until 2.
it was like a
the
marching
morning.
band.
Yeah.
Like
just banging drums and singing this little drum circle.
Right.
It was like,
and I don't know if it was like a certain time of the year where there was like some sort of a celebration happening. There was definitely like an art festival there happening during that time. And so maybe it was an anomaly, but like that we stayed in that hostel for one night, and I was sick that night.
Yeah.
That we were in the hostel. I don't think anybody else was sick yet. But then that next day I was just like, I can't do this.
Oh, we didn't get any sleep.
Another night. Yeah. And then we all started getting, the symptoms started showing up, and I was like, we got to find somewhere else to stay. And so I just went on, Airbnb, and I found an apartment, and it was just down the street. And so we got out of the hostel and went to the apartment. And I'm so glad that we did that. And I'm thankful that you weren't like so fixated on this idea of staying in this place and like, having that experience, because it just wasn't worth it in the end. And so being flexible, being able to pivot is really important when you're traveling. And I'm glad that we did that.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, challenges, lessons learned, bonding and takeaways. Talk about the bonding and talk about the takeaways, and we'll end with that.
Well, I think that a lot of bonding happened, like I was saying earlier, like there are a lot of different personalities in our family. We have a large family. It's made up of a lot of different types of people. And some of us were like way outside of our comfort zone. Some of us were just like, right in their comfort zone. Yeah. But either way, I feel like us all being in it together was just a bonding experience in of itself.
I think anytime you disconnect from your day-to-day responsibilities and stresses and worries and distractions that pull you apart from each other, and you're just together doing something, that it's a really good opportunity. Really, it's a really like travel specific opportunity where I may have gone to Machu Picchu before, but I never did that visit to Machu Picchu, right? And I lived in Peru for 18 years, but I didn't go to these places with my own children, right? And my wife. And so doing those experiences, some of them were like, oh, I've done this a bunch of times, but seeing like Jameis freak out and get super excited about something, like when we saw the little llamas and they're petting him, like that was so fun to watch that, right? So there's that cool experience, but then there's them saying like, hey, can we stay up till 11 o'clock tonight? We just want to play the card game. And you're like, okay. And you just kind of like look down and see them in the little like living room, little sala down there, and they're all just like playing cards and laughing, and it's those are bonding experiences. You don't know what your kids are going to remember, because I don't know. I mean, tell me about something when I was 12 and I'll see if I remember it, right? I don't know, but going on the trip, that will be remembered.
Yeah.
How it made them feel, that will be remembered, right? Laughing about the hard things. I went on a trip one time and there was one guy on it that was, he kind of joined up to our group and he was really challenging. And we kept reminding each other, we're like, yeah, but when this trip's done, we're going to talk about this person forever. It's going to end up becoming one of the highlights that we laugh about all the time, right? So, one of our kids experiencing the difference between a fart and what happens when your stomach isn't doing well. That's funny, right? And that's a bonding experience where it's like,
wasn't necessarily funny in the moment.
Gotta find a bathroom. Not funny in the moment for that poor kid. For the rest of us, it was pretty funny. But then I also got to like share with that kid and say like, hey, everybody poops their pants. Like it happens. It happens after you're a baby for exactly the reason that happened to you.
And you could help that child and
see that like it's not the end of the world.
Yeah,
it's not the end of the world. Let's go find a bathroom and let's throw some underwear out, right? So those type of things, like they're not that's a perfect example. For that kid, that wasn't fun in the moment. But 10 years from now, when we're laughing about when we're all petting the cats and one kid did a little fart that wasn't a fart, and then it became like this big, that's a funny,
I can't believe you're telling
it's a funny thing though, right?
Yeah.
And so those are bonding things.
Totally.
And like those shared like points on the timeline of life where it's like, was there a bunch of art stuff that was up that was really cool right in that area, a huge festival going on? Yeah, that was really cool. Are they going to remember any of the art?
And I think that it's
no, they're going to remember the funny experience.
The thing about it is I think it's the way that you react, right? We could have been like, oh, I can't believe it. Like, wow, now what are we going to do? We're out and I can't believe that
ruined the afternoon.
Like, what a disruption. And now we're going to, like we didn't. We were just like, okay, like this is going to be fine. We're going to roll with this. We're going to deal with it. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And, I think that's just a really good reminder that when things come at you in life, like it really is just like the way that you handle it, the way that you react to it that determines like,
your response is more important than what happened.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's what we talk about too. We didn't over schedule, over plan. We're like, okay, today will be
because you allow space for those things. You
for
allow,
the adventure.
Absolutely.
Like you invite adventure in when you allow space for it to happen.
And they turn into like some of the funniest things. Like even I remember we were all under the weather but we really wanted to see the changing of the guard.
Yeah.
And the weather was really bad that day. It was dreary, gloomy, like people were feeling sick. It was like
every kid on DayQuil, us on DayQuil, and
but
Tylenol.
We went anyway,
were doing it.
And it actually was pretty disappointing.
It was nothing like what it used to be.
But then remember when we went, I think we went to a coffee shop. We turned around a corner and then there were
a person in a giant guinea pig.
Yeah, this big
guinea
dancing
pig costume
guinea
dancing.
Pig. And they were filming like a music video or something. And it was
our older kids were just like,
so
what are we watching?
Funny. Yeah, it was like one of those unexpected, hilarious moments. And we wouldn't have experienced it if we would have stayed in the Airbnb that day, right? Like, so, you never know what you're going to experience when you're out in the world. And so just being open like to those experiences. And it's like, that was absolutely not planned, but like it was one of the funniest like moments. And I think there were other bonding experiences that we made space for. You and I went on some dates. So like I would say if your kids are old enough to stay home alone, right? Like not when they're really little, we couldn't have done that when they were, 4, 5, 6, 7. But now that they're teenagers, like we were like, hey, we're going to go out for coffee, just the two of us. Like you guys hang here. And they were absolutely fine with that, right? Like they were totally good with having some downtime. But that was really special, like for you and I to just go and do our own thing and like go on like a date on our trip. And then I did that also like with our daughter. She's really obsessed right now with Korean corn dogs. And there was a place in Lima down at the where our hotel or our Airbnb was, right next door. And so she's like, can we go down there? Just the two of us. And
Yeah.
so we did. And that was such a, like a sweet bonding moment for the two of us on that trip. And totally unplanned, unexpected, but like creating space for those moments and being okay with, like, we were on a trip with a group. It was a large group, but being okay to be like, we're going to like go do our own thing.
Yeah.
Or, you know,
Who wants
we're
to
gonna,
stay home and play cards? Who wants to go? We did that.
it doesn't have to be all or
multiple
nothing,
times.
all in, right? Like we were okay with people opting out of things or just going to do our own thing, like, and not all having to have this collective experience every single day, every step of the way.
Yeah. I think one thing, maybe this is my last point to share about traveling with kids, is we talked about the flight, making the flight like fun, making the actual trip fun. But when you're doing a trip together, I think it's helpful and important early on as you're preparing for it and thinking about it and telling the kids about it, that like, let them know we're going to break some rules.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to, we're pretty strict on screen time. We see that our kids have less patience when they have a lot of screen time. And so we talk about that. We're like, hey, on this trip, we're going to like download some movies from Netflix. We're going to have some movie nights where you get to watch a Netflix movie you've recorded. Stuff. Remember, we have to be patient with everyone. We're traveling, so we might not have great sleep all the time. And so you kind of make that trade-off where you're like, hey, we're gonna request that you give extra patience. And it's not going to come naturally. So sometimes we'll have to remind you, but we're like, you have to like own it, put a fake smile on your face until you feel it, and just show up happy for everybody. But the trade-off is that you're going to break a bunch of rules. You're going to stay up later than normal. You're going to get more screen time. You're going to get to do these different things that aren't typical of back home. Also, there are additional adventures you're going to get to do that aren't typical of what we do back home.
Right.
And
setting
so,
expectations.
Yeah, I think
is
setting
really
expectations
important.
is really important. Part of that is like sharing the schedule with them ahead of time, sharing which rules and how often they're going to be allowed to be broken and so that. So it makes it like this. You step out of your family dynamic and you become. You're still a family, but you become like a traveling little like
team.
Crew, and you're a team, and you're working together. And of course, you're not going to follow the rules of little kids because you're asked to behave like a seasoned traveler, right? And so that was really fun for me. That was a takeaway where it's like, hey, this is a fun moment that I want to repeat again, where our kids get treated like they're older, and we invite them to act accordingly. And I was super stoked with how our kids traveled, how they interacted. You know, when I was on that trip with my friends where we flew into Ecuador and flew out of Rio, one of the fun parts is like you get tired, right? You get tired, you have lack of sleep and stuff. And so two people would kind of go at it a little bit, and then the other ones would just troll them and have a good time. So that happened in our family too, where two kids would be like, they're just like snarking a little bit, and then the other ones are like, oh boy. And so it was kind of fun to be in a different dynamic than what's typical for our family, right? So typically we'd be like, hey guys, not appropriate. Those are not kind words. But there it was just like, it was fun. We were having fun. Like, yeah, they're a little tired, and then they get trolled a little bit, and then they'd smarten up. So things like that, like introducing a different dynamic into how the family interacts with each other and the relationship dynamics, even if it's just for 3 weeks, was fun. And I think we talked about a lot of big stuff with them on that trip, and really candidly. And we invited their feedback, talked about our businesses, what's working, what's not working, about where we live right now, what's working for us and what's not working, and how they feel about it, right? So that was fun. We disconnected, and we had different versions of interactions with each other that I think we then brought home, and it kind of colors and filters how you view the relationship with the kids moving forward. It's like, well, I can have that conversation. Like, oh, that's not just a little baby anymore. I can solicit feedback, because we did a lot of those type of conversations on the trip. So for me, I think traveling introduces a different dynamic within the relationships. And so we've traveled together, and that's pretty freaking cool.
Yeah.
Backpacked. So bonding, takeaways, I would just say do it. If it needs to be a camping trip nearby and you're going to pack your own backpacks. Let them pack their. I mean, the first time, make sure you're reviewing what they're packing, or you're going to get one kid that shows up with 9 pairs of underwear and nothing else, right?
Yeah.
His name's Jameis. um, but one time we flew to Hawaii and I opened his suitcase. It was like it was like our fifth trip we'd done together. I get there, I lift his carry-on. It feels super light. I open it up. It's one long sleeve shirt and one pair of underwear. And I'm like, what the heck? So you do need to look.
Right.
But letting them learn how to pack
Right.
and pack small for a longer trip, that's such a skill set, and that to be able to give that to them. So that takeaway of showing them that the world is available before they have like established themselves in their careers, that was a super valuable takeaway for them, I believe. And then for us as parents, just to start that experience of being friends with our kids. You know, they're still our kids, and there's still a dynamic of parent and child on this trip. But someday it's going to always be parent and child, but it's going to be like parent and child who become friends. And that we actually shared that with them on this trip of like, that's what we want someday. We hope that you guys choose to be friends with us, and someday you invite us on a trip, not just because we're paying for it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, any final takeaways for you?
I think what's important to note is that this is our experience and this is what works for us, right? This may not be achievable or attainable for other people out there, but do what works for you. And like, bottom line, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Step outside of get outside of the box, do something different, and involve your kids. Like, get them involved in the process, in the planning process, in
Picking
the
their own
packing
backpack.
process. Yeah, absolutely. In like the whole thing, every step of the way, they'll feel a sense of ownership and maturity, and they will grow from that experience in ways that you just can't grow otherwise. And so I would just encourage listeners out there, like, even if they're, going to, the town next to them for a day trip, or, you're going camping or whatever it is, like, just to include your kids and be really communicative and set expectations and be flexible.
I think a cool thing that you can do with kids, once they, our older kids have a phone, you can give them their digital ticket. And so they have it on their phone. So when they walk through, they can scan it, and they get that like sense of ability and ownership. The cool thing is that you can still keep it in your Apple Wallet, or you can still keep it on your phone, but you give that to them and let them go beep and walk through. Like, they've done something that other kids don't typically do, right? Which is control their tickets, control their travel, understand the boarding times, all that. So the whole thing is an opportunity to teach responsibility, ownership of experience. We even talked about in the trip, like, guys, own your own experience. Like, if you really want to do something, advocate for it. Tell us, I really want to stop and look in that store. I really want to try that food. I really want to, that is a soda or pop that I've never had before. What does it taste like? I want to try it. Like, don't just sit there and wish you'd done it, right? To speak up and advocate for yourself. So I think traveling is another opportunity to give your kids a sense of responsibility, independence, and to advocate for themselves, which just helps them in life.
Yeah.
All right.
Cool.
We did it. Another episode.
Right on.
Love you.
Love you too.